Hey there, Dr. Daniel Chong, vital-human.com. I talk a lot about ApoB, or apolipoprotein B, as a crucial factor to assess for risk for cardiovascular disease. And yet, some people don't really exactly know what that is and why it's different, etc. So I thought I'd do a quick video to explain that. So, the largest majority of research on cardiovascular risk from the angle of cholesterol-related molecules is with LDL-C. But LDL-C is technically an estimation of what we care about in that angle, which is how many actual particles of LDL, which is like a protein mixed with the fats of different types, or a lipoprotein. We care about how many particles there are. But when we check an LDL-C, we are technically checking how much cholesterol is being trafficked or carried around on those particles. And so it's not an accurate count of how many actual particles there are, but the risk is more accurately correlated with the number of particles than the amount of cholesterol being carried around. So think about it this way. If really what we care about is how many cars are on the road in a city, maybe during rush hour, when you do an LDL-C, it's like counting how many passengers are out there and then trying to estimate how many actual vehicles there are. Whereas if you count the actual particle number, then you're counting how many actual vehicles. Now, the angle that ApoB comes in with all of this is that ApoB is a protein. It's the primary protein that the structure of LDL molecules is built on. It's kind of like scaffolding, so to speak, for the building up of the LDL molecule. And so it's also a protein that's present on other types of lipoproteins, the main ones being VLDL and lipoprotein A, that can also contribute to risk. So all of these lipoproteins, the reason why we care about them is that they can get into the artery lining and get stuck in there. So technically, when we're trying to assess risk as it's coming from the angle of how many total amounts of these particles that can get stuck in the artery lining are actually floating around in your bloodstream, the interesting thing about apolipoprotein B is that it's one thing that all of those have in common. So when you count it, you're counting all of the possible particles that can get stuck in the artery lining and get oxidized and start to form into a plaque. So hopefully that makes sense. Apolipoprotein B, if you go back to the analogy of the city with all the different vehicles driving around, if you're trying to assess how many vehicles are on the road during rush hour, and there's cars and trucks and different types of vehicles, and let's say LDL is like the main vehicle on the road, which it is, it's the highest amount of these lipoproteins that's floating around in the bloodstream, and you only count the LDL, you might sometimes miss out on a fairly high number of other types of vehicles. So if you count an ApoB, think about it like you're counting bumpers that are in common, with all different types of vehicles that are driving. So it's like if you count the cars, you might miss the trucks, but if you count the bumpers, you're going to count all the cars, all the trucks, etc. So long story short, ApoB is now quite well proven to be a more accurate risk marker for cardiovascular disease from the angle of contribution of cholesterol-related molecules. There's obviously other types of risk factors for cardiovascular disease that don't have to do with that, but it's the best way to count things from that angle. So hopefully that makes sense. If you're stuck with an LDL-C, if you only have a lipid panel, then which only gives you an LDL-C, then actually the next most accurate way to count the risk from that angle is by calculating a non-HDL-C. And basically, simple enough, the way you do that is you subtract your total cholesterol from your HDL cholesterol, and you're left with non-HDL-C. That's like a rough estimate for ApoB, and it's been shown to be a better predictor for risk than LDL-C, which is still usually predictive in most people, but not everybody for various reasons that we don't have to get into here. Okay, I think that's all. Hopefully that makes sense. Vital-human.com. Daniel Chong, thank you. Talk to you next time.